Hello everyone! Today we will be talking about Season 2, Episode 6 of his Dark Materials, Malice. To be honest, this was not actually my favorite episode. I felt like the previous episodes have been so strong. This season has been so wonderful, and this episode was more about getting all of our characters into position for next week's finale. I thought there were a few scenes of exception, but for the most part, most of these were purely logistical. Everyone just needed to do something or get somewhere or meet someone, and that was really the point. There is a lot to talk about though, so let's dive right in. This episode started very promisingly with angels. We see that the witches, Ruta Skadi and Serafina Pekkala, along with their witch sisters, are looking in the sky and seeing figures that they know are angels. They mention that angels have not been seen for thousands and thousands of years, and the last time they were spotted, there was a war happening. They know that this vision of angels means that something important is going on, and Ruta knows somehow instinctively that the angels are going to Lord Asriel to help him in his cause. She decides that this would be a good opportunity for her to follow them so they can take her to Lord Asriel and she can bring him back. So we see her fly off, but we know that angels are coming. In Chitagatse, we can see that Will is really suffering physically from his wound. It looks like he is having a fever dream of some kind. Lyra and Pan are keeping a close eye on Will, and Pan is very worried that his hand with the cut off fingers is not doing well. Lyra goes outside of their apartment to fetch some water, and when she's outside, she realizes that she is not alone. She is being watched. Pretty quickly after Angelica and Paula reveal themselves, Lyra rushes back into the house, pursued by Angelica and Paula, and as she is closing the door, looking through a small hole in the door, we can see in a very Game of Thrones type of way that Angelica is looking at her right on the other side, and she says, "I can see you." It is crucial that Lyra and Will somehow escape. Lyra goes upstairs to wake Will up and tell him that they need to get the hell out of there, and the kids really try their best to scramble up to the roof. Unfortunately, the other kids who are surrounding the building have scaled the building. It's not long before Angelica, Paula, and all the other kids are right there with them. Will tells Angelica that he doesn't want to hurt anyone. He has this very powerful knife, but Angelica and Paula and all the rest do not seem very deterred. They are angry, they want justice for Tullio, and they're really out there for blood. Luckily, we see Kaisa, Serafina Pekkala's demon, arrive, and shortly after, Serafina herself swoops down and scares off Angelica, Paula, and the other kids and says, "It's time for you to leave." This is a big moment. She's come right in the nick of time. Once she gets the kids out of Chitagatse and into the hills, we see that Serafina is unwrapping Will's wound and wants to look at it because she knows that Will is really not doing well. Will is surprisingly uncooperative and extremely untrusting of Serafina and the witches in general, and he does not seem eager to allow her into his life and his world and his wound. Serafina quickly decides that the wound has not been poisoned, so that's good, but this is a kind of wound like she's never seen before, and she asks Will if it's his knife that created this. He very begrudgingly says that yes, it is. When she asks further questions about the knife, he immediately clams up, and it's really Lyra who's like, "Hey, she's the adult in the room, she's the expert, we need to defer to her expertise." And it's Lyra who actually gives Serafina the knife to look at. Will is really not on board with this. After looking at the wound and at the knife, Serafina determines that this is certainly not going to heal by itself. She and the witches need to intervene, and that they need to create and perform a spell to help him heal. Back in Lyra's world, we see that Lee Scoresby and Joffrey are still in Lee's balloon, and they go ahead and fly right through the anomaly. Mary is in Chitagatse, and it seems like she's genuinely enjoying herself. We see her consulting the I Ching right in front of the Tower of the Angels without a care in the world. She's just trying to figure out what to do next, what signs to look for. While the witches are gathering lichen that they need to cast their spell on Will, Lyra sees her opportunity to ask Seraphina all the questions she's had about witches. Seraphina seems slightly annoyed about this, but indulges her. Lyra wants to know if Seraphina thinks that they're safe, and specifically if Will is going to be okay. Seraphina is not so sure. She expresses that Will's wound is pretty bad, and that it would probably be better if they go back to their own world where the fauna and flora around them are much more potent. Seraphina also mentions that it would be much easier to hide Lyra back in their own home, and that she has taken a vow to protect Lyra and she's going to do whatever it takes to accomplish that. This is not exactly what Lyra wants to hear. She is not ready to go home. And more than that, Will is hearing this entire conversation from a distance and looks particularly nonplussed to hear that the witches might drag them both back to Lyra's world when he knows that he has something more important to do, and that something is finding his father. Will's emotional and physical states have been steadily declining, and he finally snaps. He asks Lyra with a lot of tension if she can consult the alethiometer to find out exactly where his dad is. She sees that he is not in a mood to be argued with, and she goes ahead and consults the alethiometer to discover that Will's dad is already in the world that Cittàgazze is located in. So they don't need to cut through any windows, they just need to continue going. Lee and Joffrey have successfully passed through the anomaly and are now in that world with Lyra, Will, Seraphina, and the others. Lee seems particularly skeptical of Joffrey's shamanic powers, so to speak, and says, "I thought shamans were supposed to be able to fly." And Joffrey kind of chuckles and says, "Well, I needed to fly, so I summoned you, and here I am flying." We get the sense that he is not the typical shaman that we've all been looking for, which might make sense considering I do not think of him as a shaman. Joffrey is very firm in saying that their task is currently to find the bearer of the subtle knife and to tell the bearer what his task will be. Lee still wants to make sure that they are on the same page, and that Joffrey will also instruct the knife bearer to protect Lyra, that will be part of the knife bearer's task as well. And Joffrey very smoothly says he will protect all of us. So it seems pretty clear that Joffrey is trying to weasel his way into this bargain, but may not necessarily live up to his end of it. Mrs. Coulter and Lord Boreal head back to the window in Oxford with their backpacks and all of their gear ready to take on Cittàgazze and everything that it has. In the city of Cittàgazze, Mary has been having what seems like a very lovely day. We see her sitting outside in the sun right next to the beach, and there is a hovering for a second of wings. I got the idea, and I know from the books, that the angels that make up the cave or who have been helping Mary all this way are still with her. They're protecting her from the specters, and we can see their wings beating for just a second in the sunshine. Mary is also being followed by someone else though. Angelica and Paola have been watching Mary as she walks through Cittàgazze, and they realize that she is not in danger of the specters. It looks like she can't even see the specters, so they know that Mary is someone special. The three of them eventually collide a little bit later in the episode when Mary realizes she's being followed and invites whoever is following her to come out so she can talk to them directly. We see Angelica and Paola come out to meet her. They just look exhausted and tired and sad. They ask Mary who she is. They know she's not from this world, but they ask her about the specters and why she's not having any trouble with them. She doesn't really know what they're talking about though, because she doesn't have the ability to see them and she hasn't been attacked by any of them. Paola asks Mary if she can have a hug, and the two of them hug in the sweetest, saddest moment, and we see how kind Mary is. She's really a generous, sweet, loving, and very nurturing person, and Paola definitely needs that. Angelica asks Mary in the most heartbreaking way if Mary can look after them, be the adult in their life, and tell them what to do. Mary knows that she has a task to perform that does not include these two kids, so she can't really stay with them, but she does say that she will be happy to help them find their adults. In not so many words, Serafina tells Lyra that she is very concerned about the knife, and she's also kind of scared of Will. She knows that the knife is dangerous, and she's not really sure if Will is safe to be around. Lyra scoffs at this idea and explains to Serafina that while the knife is very dangerous, Will is nothing but a great person and there's nothing to worry about in terms of his character. Lyra tells Serafina that the alethiometer has told her that it is her job to help Will find his father, and she trusts the alethiometer, so she really does need to stick with Will and help him in his journey. Serafina tells Lyra that she had previously thought Lyra's primary gift was her ability to read the alethiometer. That was what identified Lyra to the witches as the one they'd been waiting for, but having met Lyra and having observed her, she now realizes that it's Lyra's obstinacy that is her true gift. She also promises that the witches will continue to protect Lyra, and if that means protecting Will as well, she will do whatever it takes. We then see the much anticipated witch ceremony where they try to heal Will. I have been looking forward to this since I saw the trailer for season 2, and I have got to say, visually it did not disappoint. I was really impressed with not only how subtle this was, but how kind of realistic it was. It wasn't cheesy, it wasn't dumb, it wasn't over the top. I just really enjoyed this. I wish it had been a little bit longer, but basically we see the witches say some words in a language we can't recognize over Will's body. He looks like he's either asleep or in a trance, and they really do the best that they can. I really loved this scene of the spell visually, but I think, to be honest, it lacked some of the substance that was in the book. The witch's spell in the book was really cool because it went into the history of the knife, or at least what the witches thought the history might be. And I think it is worth hearing just a tiny bit of it. I'm just gonna read the first portion. Little knife, they tore your iron out of Mother Earth's entrails, built a fire and boiled the ore, made it weep and bleed and flood, hammered it and tempered it, plunging it in icy water, heating it inside the forge till your blade was blood red, scorching. Then they made you wound the water once again and yet again, till the steam was boiling fog, and the water cried for mercy. And when you sliced a single shade into 30,000 shadows, then they knew that you were ready. Then they called you Subtle One. There's so much good stuff in this. Maybe they didn't want to go through the entire spell because it is kind of long in the show. I just think that the witches are so interesting. I would have loved to have heard this. Serafina asks Lyra if she can consult the alethiometer one more time to find out where Will's dad is. Lyra checks the alethiometer and is told that they need to go up. They need to continue up the mountain and they will eventually find him there. We then head to the Magisterium in Lyra's world, and we see that Fra Pavel, the Magisterium alethiometrist, has finally found his response to Father MacPhail's question of where is Mrs. Coulter now. Fra Pavel is looking particularly timid and tells Father MacPhail that he's afraid to deliver the results because he understands just how heretical they are. After much prodding from Father MacPhail and some interesting logic, Fra Pavel finally admits that Mrs. Coulter is following her child, Lyra Belacqua, into another world through the anomaly. After a bit more prodding, we also hear Fra Pavel tell Father MacPhail that the witches have a prophecy about Lyra. He says that Lyra will be the one who brought about our downfall, the mother of us all, the cause of all of our sin. He doesn't actually mention the name Eve, but if any of us have read the Bible, we know this is where this is going, and this is just the information that Father MacPhail was looking for. He knows that this is the key and he needs to act on this quickly. Mrs. Coulter and Lord Boreal are walking through Cittàgazze, and we can see just how uncomfortable Lord Boreal is. He's definitely not excited about this jaunt, and it looks like he's waiting for specters to swoop in at any moment. They come across an adult man who looks completely enraptured by whatever he's staring at. Mrs. Coulter, unafraid as always, gets really close to him and realizes that he is one of the people who's been attacked by a specter. He's completely unresponsive to her though, and Lord Boreal remarks that it looks like these people have been severed. But after closer inspection, Mrs. Coulter says, no, that's not quite right. What's been done to them is much more severe. And instead of being repulsed by this, she says, we could learn from this. And she seems genuinely fascinated by the specters, what they do, and rather than being scared, she seems almost excited. At the magisterium, Father MacPhail tells the higher-ups of the church that the authority himself has spoken to him and that he has news for everyone. The magisterium will have a new direction. He says, Fra Pavel has brought me information of a threat so grave in nature that the world has only seen it once before. Father MacPhail has gone ahead and sent magisterium soldiers through the anomaly. This is part of his action plan, and he also mentions that first to partake of this great sacrifice will be the child Lyra Belacqua. I love how this is worded. It's so delicate yet so forceful. First of the sacrifice. So the idea that Lyra is a sacrifice, an unwitting sacrifice to something larger than all of them, but kind of glossing over the fact that he's talking about child murder. That's what this is. He has sent soldiers to kill a child, and that is pretty fucking bleak. Just gonna put that out there. Back in the world of Cittàgazze, Serafina is talking to Will and examining his hand. They are not with Lyra, so this is really a first time that we see them talking, just the two of them. Serafina is definitely holding something back. We see that she has a lot of information that she doesn't feel comfortable sharing with Will. So Kaisa goes ahead and tells Will that there is a prophecy about Lyra, that Lyra is important, and that this prophecy also mentions a boy. Serafina does not know if Will is this boy, but she wants Will to know that just as much as Lyra thinks that it is her duty to protect Will, it is also Will's duty to protect Lyra. Mrs. Coulter is rummaging through some bottles at what looks like is probably a pharmacy when her golden monkey demon is drawn outside. There's something happening outside that the monkey just cannot resist, and Mrs. Coulter, after smelling a bottle, puts it down and follows him out there. The specters of indifference have finally arrived, and Mrs. Coulter is completely intrigued. As soon as Mrs. Coulter goes outside to follow the golden monkey demon and to approach the specters, Lord Boreal, in the most cowardly move, actually closes and locks the door behind her. I was really touched by this level of cowardice and this level of self-preservation that he displays. It was really something. When Mrs. Coulter reaches the point where the golden monkey demon is sitting, we see her perform some kind of mental or emotional gymnastics. The golden monkey is extremely riled up with the specters just a few yards ahead of him, and he goes from very excited to almost rigid, almost like he's being drugged, and just kind of sits back and stares and is very, very silent. It's clear that she has done something to subdue him, and as soon as that's done, she collects herself and moves forward to greet the specters. When she gets to the Tower of the Angels, she is completely surrounded by specters, and they get very, very close to her, but she also gets very close to them. She reaches her hands out as if to touch them, and they almost touch, but as soon as they get close enough, they kind of smell her or whatever it is they're doing to detect her, and they immediately back off. She is loving every minute of this, and she realizes that she can control them. She moves her hands and her arms, and they kind of move around her. She's really the center of their attention, but they're not attacking her, and she is so delighted by this. Lee and Joffrey happen to be flying over the square in their hot air balloon when this is happening, and they see the swarm of specters below. Lee is very concerned, thinking that Lyra might be in danger, but Joffrey clarifies that specters are only interested in adults because they feed off of dust. Those are the words he uses. Because kids don't have that accumulation of dust, they are impervious to the harm the specters might commit. This kind of clarifies, we definitely understood this much, but the specters are interested in dust. Dust is integral to what demons are, what they're made out of. So if you don't have a demon, or you can mysteriously disconnect from your demon, you're a-okay. This helps us understand what Mrs. Coulter is doing. She is rejecting the dust that is a part of her, rejecting her demon, and that is how she is able to interact with the specters completely unscathed. Lee and Joffrey also see that they are being pursued by Magisterium airships. At this point, the airships are not very close, but if they don't make a move soon, the airships will catch up. Lyra and Will finally have a moment to discuss what happened with Angelica, Paola, and the other kids, and Lyra says that she's never really seen kids act the way that they acted, that kind of mob mentality. Will tells Lyra that he has seen kids act that way, and he talks about all of the experiences, the negative experiences he's had surrounding his mom. Will shares what seems like are particularly painful memories with Lyra about his mom, and tells her that at the height of her delusions, Will's mom was completely bullied by some of the boys that he knew. He talks about what a struggle it was to be the one to take care of her, and he tells Lyra that he used to have daydreams about his dad coming into the situation, coming back into his life, and really being there to save the day. And he's really ready for some kind of authority figure to step in and take some of that responsibility off of his shoulders. Will tells Lyra that he didn't have anyone he could trust, and Lyra interjects, "Until you met me." And there's really a sense that they have each other's back, and this is really one of the first times they've met their own equals. Mrs. Coulter is quite excited about her recent interactions with the specters and brings a bottle of wine out from the cafe where she and Lord Boreal have been sitting. She pours Boreal another glass of wine, and Lord Boreal asks how it is that she can control the specters. Mrs. Coulter tells Lord Boreal that the specters are interested in what's human about us, so she disconnects herself, she suppresses that part of herself, and we see that the golden monkey is wincing as she says this. Boreal talks about what a great victory this is for them and what a great victory having the subtle knife will be. He also mentions that he wants to share that power with her. Boreal says, "I would like an equal to share it all with." And Mrs. Coulter asks, "You think me your equal?" Lord Boreal says, "In every way." And Mrs. Coulter says, "Then let's drink to that." And she smiles. And we know from her smile that this is not a good thing. Lord Boreal takes a drink of his wine at that, and we realize very soon after that she has poisoned him. That bottle that she was smelling earlier was poisoned. She's put it in his wine, and now he is slowly and agonizingly dying right in front of her. This is the time for Mrs. Coulter to release all of those thoughts and feelings she's had about Lord Boreal, and she tells him, "Your ambitions were small. They would have always ended here. Boreal, I didn't need you. You would only hold me back. You are not, nor have ever been, my equal." She's been dying to say this probably since she met him, and it must feel very, very satisfying for her to finally get to the point where she knows all of his tricks, or at least most of them. She has outwitted him, outsmarted him, and she is really on her own path. She doesn't need him anymore, so she is going to dispose of him. We watch Lord Boreal die. She tells him, "Don't struggle, just let it take you." Lord Boreal's snake demon vanishes in a sparkle of dust. Lyra, Will, and the witches are still trudging up the mountain when they are unfortunately approached by a specter, and that specter attacks one of the witches. As soon as Lyra realizes what's going on, she summons Will with the knife, and we see the specter leave as soon as the knife gets close enough. Now that Lord Boreal is dead and slumped over in his chair, we can see that Mrs. Coulter has really been enjoying herself. She is several bottles of wine deep at this point, and she has gone ahead and lit a candle. She has that manic glint in her eye, and she holds her hand above the lit candle, getting closer and closer to it. As her hand gets closer to the flame and we see how much of a physical toll this is taking on her, we also see that this is taking a toll on the golden monkey. Mrs. Coulter hurting herself hurts her golden monkey. And she says to him, "Strength is selfish, remember that. All of this evil, all of this separation, all of this suppression is really bad for her, and she's willing to accept that." This episode ends with Joffrey and Lee Scoresby in their balloon Being pursued by those Magisterium Zeppelins, the Zeppelins have gotten much, much closer and are starting to fire on Lee's balloon. Lee is completely panicking, says, "Joffrey, I thought you were taking care of this. What are you doing? You're just sitting there." And Joffrey, meanwhile, has summoned a storm. We see that his thunder and lightning storm has sent beams of lightning down. They've struck some of the Zeppelins, and many of the Zeppelins are on fire. There are 2 Zeppelins that are left though, and Joffrey summons his shaman reserves, and he actually enchants, or perhaps inspires, motivates a bunch of birds from the forest to go attack the remaining 2 Zeppelins. The birds successfully bring down one of the Zeppelins. We can see that it's falling, and the remaining Zeppelin looks like it's turning around. They know that death by bird is coming to them, so they are ostensibly retreating when one of the shooters on that Zeppelin is able to shoot the gas canister of the hot air balloon, and Lee and Joffrey are heading down as well. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I am so looking forward to next week's finale, though I know all of my pals in the UK have already seen it. I'm also looking forward to getting to look at this whole season, kind of taking some notes about what it was. Did it live up to my expectations? Were there things that I thought it was lacking? A whole retrospective. So I wish you all a very safe, happy, and very healthy week. See you next time.